What happens when you're in control of your finances, your career, and your well-being? There's no limit to what you can achieve. I'm your host, Jay Vickery, bringing you on a journey through finance, fitness, and finesse. A podcast about developing your 8 dimensions of wellness. If you're looking to elevate your wealth, well-being, and discover the power of balance, join me bi-weekly, Mondays and Fridays, to learn why money matters, but wellness counts. Hey finessers! Welcome to another episode of Finance, Fitness, and Finesse, where we elevate your wealth and wellness. I'm your host, Jay Vic, and thank you for joining me for Savvy Scholar Sunday, where industry experts share their insights on building wealth, managing stress, and living a balanced life. Today we're going to explore something we use every day but can't live without: food and money. LCSW and Certified Eating Disorder Specialist Supervisor Caitlin Cornell, the founder of KC Counseling Eating Disorder Clinic, is here to discuss the impact of eating disorders on financial strain and vice versa. Let's get into it. What is your first money memory?
Ooh. Okay, the first thing that comes to mind is every year around Christmas, our grandparents would give us money, like Christmas money. It wasn't a lot. It was like $20 maybe. I mean, I was like 7, right? So like, what did I need more money for? I remember making the choice. You will probably not get this reference, but the Backstreet Boys Millennium album had just come out, the year 2000. And I remember like really, really thinking about it. And I decided that's what I was going to spend my $20 on, because that was back when new albums cost like $20. So I would say that's my first money memory. What
I
a
love
fun
that.
question. What a fun question.
Yeah, what a fun response. Was the album everything you thought it would be? Or like, how did you listen to it? Was it with like a little CD player and headphones, or did you have something in your room?
Yeah, so I had a pink boombox and I know every word to that album. So yes, I totally got my money's worth. Also, it is related to that, but when I was in labor, Jake put on that album because he knew it would distract me, because I know all of the words to every single song on that album. So that's the gift that keeps on giving, honestly. Like that was the best, hands down, best thing I've ever spent any money on.
That's awesome. No, that definitely sounds like an investment that was worth it, especially if it got you
Yes.
through labor.
Oh
That's
yeah.
hilarious.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing. That's a super fun memory. Can you share a little bit about your background and what motivated you to become a licensed social worker and certified eating disorder specialist?
I did not think that I ever wanted to get my clinical license. Full disclosure, I ended up getting it because a friend of mine at the time, who actually ended up doing my LCSW supervision, he was like, there's literally no downside. Like, just get it. You get a pay raise and it just opens up more opportunities. I always thought that I wanted to do like more outreach type of work. So I didn't think that I needed my LCSW, but I'm glad that I got it, because then I'm able to do what I do now. So that was kind of a motivator there. Was it was a logical kind of career move. I have no regrets in terms of getting it. And then getting my CEDS, I care a lot about credentials. I care a lot about people. If they say that they are a specialist in something, I'm going to be looking for their credentials, right? So I thought people would naturally do the same if I was calling myself an eating disorder specialist after opening the practice. It felt like I needed maybe that credibility. Again, it just kind of felt like, why not get it? I really went back and forth and debated whether or not I wanted to get it, because I thought people's experiences with me spoke for themselves, like maybe I didn't need the CEDS. But at the end of the day, I was like, that, yeah, I think this credential will add things. I think it's a good business move. I think that it adds credibility to the work that I'm doing. And then, of course, ended up getting the next highest certification, which is now I can supervise people getting their CEDS.
Definitely sounds like there's been a lot of education around that. I mean, I'm going through the LSW and then the LCSW path, which I know can take a few years, but then SEDS is an additional specialization. How was
Hmm.
that educational experience for you? I mean, were you able to lock into the things that you learned due to genuine interest, or was it harder to get through all that extra education?
What a fabulous question. Because despite saying that it was kind of a logical career move and sort of added credibility to the work that I do, it was profoundly educational. Like, I truly believe if someone is going to call themselves an eating disorder specialist, they better have this CEDS because the requirements to get that, like you said, it's, a few years to get your LCSW and then a few more years to get your CEDS. And in that time, I just learned so much stuff. Truly, because you have an exam before you can get your CEDS. And the preparation for that, I just learned a profound amount about eating disorders and motivated me from that education. I was able to put together like presentations and continuing education stuff and like educate other professionals because it's just invaluable information whenever you're going through the CEDS process.
I love learning from you. Like seriously, I mean, all of the webinars that you run, even in classes at the MSW program, but especially around eating disorders, I can definitely tell there's a different type of passion there, especially from the work you've put in to accumulate that diverse knowledge. So I'm very appreciative of the work you put in for that. And it's definitely reassuring to hear because as I go down my financial therapy route, there's a couple of
Mhm.
credentials that I also value, not only for the credibility piece, but there's educational components that I know I need to learn outside of
Yeah.
just teaching myself. There are some people who you can become a financial therapist without getting it's called a CFT, so a certified financial therapist. And
Hmm.
then I'm also on the track to get my certified financial planner to also provide
Nice.
financial assistance. But I have such a strong vision of what I want for my private practice, and having a
Yeah.
mentor like you and other professionals in the field that I've been able and been blessed to learn from. It just gets me so excited to pursue all these things, but I also know I have to take it 6 months to a year at a time with the different license and certifications that I'm going after. What inspired you to start KC Counseling? I'm pretty sure you founded it in 2019. And then
Hmm.
can you speak to me on starting it and then what it's like to have stamina as a young entrepreneur just taking on a new business like that?
Sure. Before I answer that, I do want to say I am so excited for your career. And I have no doubt that your financial planning and financial therapy practice is going to be just bomb. It's going to be amazing. And there's so much value in being an expert in something, right? Like it feels really good. I think it gives someone meaning and purpose, right? For you to be an expert in that area. For me, obviously, to be an expert in eating disorders, it's like, yeah, there's a level of competence, the meaning and purpose behind it. I think it's great. Okay. Started in 2019. I went part time. I was a pediatric therapist at a medical clinic. And I ended up going part time there while I started my practice. And they knew that that's what I was doing as well. That job, just the medical model, I just don't think it's built for therapists. If anyone listening to this has been to the doctor, it's like the doctor's literally going from room to room to room to room to room. They're squeezing in as many appointments as they possibly can into one day. And I just don't think that works for therapists. So I just got burnt out very, very quickly on that schedule. But I also knew realistically, I couldn't just start the practice and survive off of that. I needed time to like grow it and advertise and kind of network a little bit. But it was a huge decision. I mostly did it in the beginning for my own happiness. The therapist that I had at the time was really, really supportive and really kind of gave me that push to do it. He had known me for a long time at that point, the therapist that I had at the time. And he just thought that being my own boss and making my own schedule and having autonomy over like my workday was going to be really good thing for my own mental health. Eventually, my schedule filled up like pretty quickly. I feel incredibly fortunate. And I wish I could tell, I wish I had some secret as to why that happened, but I truly think it was timing. I really think I started my private practice in a time where there wasn't very many eating disorder resources, first of all, but also people were really struggling. It just took maybe a couple of months to get to a caseload of 15, 20 appointments. As we started to grow, it did kind of feel again like I had to prove the credibility. There's this aspect of it that's like the money stuff, right? Like not growing just to make more money. And I don't know what this sounds so absurd, and maybe it's in my own head. I don't know. But it felt like every time I hired a new provider, I had to kind of, I don't know, show that I wasn't just doing it to make more money, that I wasn't just growing for the sake of growing. So that's one aspect in the beginning that I absolutely did not like, and I still don't like that aspect of it.
In regards to the medical model not being friendly to social workers, you're definitely a very personable person. I can tell you love communication and also connection with people. So, in regards to that medical model, was it rushed? Were you not able to connect with clients or patients because you had to go from room to room also?
It wasn't necessarily that. It didn't feel like I was rushed with the patient because I still had 45 minutes to an hour with them, but they were back to back. So you'd have like four patients, then you'd have your lunch, and then you'd have four more patients. But I found it very difficult. There was no room to breathe with that model. Also, you would have to totally bank on someone not showing up to get your notes done. It was just very overwhelming in that sense. And I just felt a lot of anxiety going into the day because it's like, okay, I'm going into like 4 hours of sessions without any sort of time or space for myself.
That makes
Yes.
sense. That definitely does sound exhausting. How old are you again?
31.
You're only 31 for the audience. Like, I'm basically chasing after Caitlin. I'm like, teach me everything you know, because I want to be where you're at least with having my practice established at such a young age. And so, how did you go about recruiting clients and then bringing on more clinicians, dietitians onto your team? I'm just wondering how in the world you can do that networking, or because I'm sure you didn't want to pull patients from your current place of work without stepping on people's toes.
Yeah, so there were a couple patients who was at their main medical clinic, and then they had a school-based health center, and I was mostly at the school-based health center. And some of those students really wanted to continue working with me. And at the time, I was not able to take public health insurance. So I wasn't able to take Medicaid. So anyone with private insurance was able to scooch over to my private practice if they wanted to. A few parents who they really wanted to make it work financially, even if they had Medicaid, because their child just hadn't really connected or opened up with anybody before. And I truly love working with teenagers. And so it was kind of heartwarming to hear that some of them did want to move over with me as well. But you're right. I don't think that the CEO at the time would have cared, quite honestly, because they didn't have a pediatric therapist to replace me. I don't think she would have cared if I took my entire caseload with me. I just couldn't because I wasn't taking Medicaid. So there's that aspect. And then, of course, my therapist was a huge help because I first met him and had started working with him as his patient whenever I was at the university. And then I followed him to his private practice. So he was a tremendous help in telling me kind of who I should go network with, which parts of the university I should network with. So that was a huge help. And then, of course, basic things like Psychology Today. I had a profile on there. I think all of this was timing. Tons of eating disorders came out of the woodworks in the pandemic, and our schedules were just absolutely obliterated. I was having like 30, 35 appointments a week. And then I was like, I can't keep doing this. I literally left my other job because I couldn't do this. So that was a huge motivator in hiring more therapists as well. So there's that. That's kind of a long-winded answer, but that's kind of the trajectory of the practice.
That's a journey. That is a journey. But I definitely hear you on the timing piece. And I know you advocate so much for accessibility At KC Counseling, it is an eating disorder clinic, but I think it definitely focuses on holistic care because you're not coming in just talking about your eating disorder. From what you teach your employees, there's a lot of underlying factors that may be causing the triggers of the eating disorder symptoms. So,
Right.
can you tell our audience a little bit about the health at every size approach and intuitive eating?
Yeah, sure. So, health at every size is really a framework in which we do not focus on weight. Weight is literally one health marker among many, many health markers. I would argue it's maybe the least important health marker. So, when someone comes to us and says, they're really unhappy with their body or they want to improve their health, Health at Every Size really embraces the fact that anyone can pursue health regardless of their body size or shape or weight, that there are health promoting behaviors we can start to embrace. Health at Every Size also respects if people don't want to pursue health. And I think that was an aspect that took me a while to kind of embrace, really respecting that people have been traumatized by their experience with weight stigma or with diet culture, and they may not be in a place where they want to pursue health. And being able to respect that also fits into the Health at Every Size framework. And then intuitive eating is a series of 10 distinct principles that really help someone tap into their intuition, basically kind of taking us back to how we all once ate when we were tiny, toddlers. Like if you've seen a toddler eat, and I have a toddler, so I get to see this every day. They'll take like 2 bites of something and put it down. And then you notice maybe like over the next 20, 30 minutes, they'll go back to the plate. They'll take a couple more bites. Like it's very just instinctual for them. So, kind of bringing us back to that, we don't do intuitive eating with everyone because they may not be in a place in their eating disorder recovery journey where they can embrace intuitive eating. And as you know, for those, sadly chronic eating disorders, we may not be able to ever use the intuitive eating framework. But I would say for those who maybe have like a subclinical eating disorder or they have been chronic dieting or yo-yo dieting for several years, intuitive eating is a really fantastic framework to use.
Yes, health at every size and intuitive eating, going through those trainings that you provided, it has reshaped my perspective so much, not only of my own body and my own self-care, but even just people walking down the street. So just to put it in simple terms, from what I'm understanding is health at every size embraces that there are a lot of different components to health other than weight, and our bodies are all different, especially due to genetics. So health at every size is having healthy habits for you at the size you're at. And then intuitive eating is following your hunger cues.
Yeah, so I want to be careful not to reduce intuitive eating to just like hunger fullness stuff because that does
Mhm.
also incorporate practical hunger and things like that and like life circumstances. But overall, I think that those are pretty good distinctions.
I appreciate you sharing that. I've realized a lot of different parallels in my passion for financial wellness. I love that you said how anybody can pursue health at every size. It may take help, but anybody's capable of pursuing those healthy habits for them that they need in their day to day life
Right.
for their optimal functioning and just contentment in each day. I believe the same thing in regards to your financial health. I think that anybody, no matter what your background, especially if you have access to a phone, which most of us all do, if you have access to internet,
Hmm.
you can at least start getting access to information or professionals. I definitely want to expand the financial therapy field for that accessibility
Yeah.
component. I haven't really met many financial therapists besides linking up with some on LinkedIn. And so there are so many parallels that we're going to get into that I want to ask you about in regards to how our finances and eating habits affect each other.
Yeah.
And especially even with the health at every size approach, one thing that I do want to ask you a little bit more about is the societal and cultural influence of the view on health. Because, we're talking about health at every size, but people trying to be healthy. But what is healthy? I mean, sure, we know the typical like eat your veggies and work out 60 minutes a
Yeah.
day and 8 hours of sleep. I mean, those clear cut standards of health actually don't work for everyone. They may not be as accessible. There's people with different disabilities, different medical things going on that are just naturally in their genes. And so I would like for you to speak a little bit more on the anti-diet approach and how at KC Counseling, we really try to help people go beyond the cultural standards of health and expectations of body image.
Yeah, right. Because the things that you just described are guidelines, right? Yes, overall, it is good for us to eat fruits and vegetables, like highly nutritious stuff like that. Absolutely. It's important that we get sleep. But I think it also embraces that sometimes life happens and stressing about those things, these health protocols, is way more harmful to us than just eating a donut because that's what we have access to at that time, right? Rather than stressing about eating the donut or what the donut's going to do to your body or any of those things. I think guidelines are good, but there has to be some flexibility around health. So I think health looks different for everyone. You already spoke to the genetic influence on our health. But I also think, oh, there's this really great like infographic. It's a health pyramid, but it shows what influences our health the most. I'll find it and send it to you. But genetics is kind of like the top of that list. Socioeconomic status is a huge, in fact, more and more research is showing that someone's socioeconomic status is highly influential of how healthy they are. Because if someone's living in a food desert, for example, and they only have access to groceries from the Circle K, which we could talk so much about what that's doing to their bank account because that food is more expensive, but also they're probably going to aim for, the giant bag of Cheetos that's, $2 versus like the apples and oranges that are there whenever you walk into the convenience stores because they're getting more food. There's a lot wrapped up in that. The anti-diet model, I do want to clarify, it's not anti-people who diet. We have plenty of patients that kind of spread out throughout the change process, and people do go back to dieting because it feels normal. It's what they're taught to do. It feels safe. It maybe feels a little less scary. They feel like they're in control of what they're putting into their body to some extent. But the anti-diet model really encompasses acceptance, body liberation. We talk all the time about meeting clients and patients where they're at, but I think the anti-diet model really embraces for the patient to meet themselves where they're at, to not have these unbelievably high standards about their health or about their body. Anti-diet model also encompasses racial issues. It's this more macro approach to an individual's health because we're really inspecting all of these different things that impact their health, and health meaning like their mental health as well, versus just telling them to diet and lose weight, because we also know just because somebody loses weight doesn't mean their health is necessarily going to improve.
It really breaks my heart to see some of my clients that are young teenagers and they're just comparing their bodies to people, whether it's in the media or like they may have older siblings that are like 10, 15 years
Yeah.
older than them that are fully developed and they have different body types, and just thinking that they need to fix themselves according to an image that they're chasing after.
Yeah.
The golden girl or male model that people tend to maybe fixate on due to it being promoted in the media, it makes them feel like there's something wrong with them when everybody is on their own journey of development, especially with your body. And our bodies are always changing according to what we're going through in our lives. It's hard to see people go through extremes, and it affects all of their 8 dimensions of wellness. And there's also the control piece of eating disorders that I've noticed, because there's so much going on in our lives, but one thing that we do try to have control over is eating. And that's with, oh, I'm going to diet. I'm going to try and hardcore control what I'm eating. Or you try to control so much that you're out of control and that leads to binge eating. It was so interesting, this podcast I was listening to about the parallels between anorexia and then financial anorexia. And I've learned about that term of financial anorexia, where you're an avid saver or you hoard your money, you like refuse to spend it on anything, especially in regards to food. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the control component of anorexia and how that can
Yeah.
parallel over to other components of your life, especially with wanting control over your money.
Totally. I've never heard that term financial anorexia, but the second you defined it, several patients popped into my head that would hoard money, or even to the extent they would lie and say that they had less money than they actually had. Not that that's particularly important, but just a very interesting sort of behavior to show how protective they are and controlling they are over that pot of money. I do think there's certainly fear involved when we talk about these behaviors. And the thing that comes to mind for me when I think about these parallels of we look at anorexia and then we look at financial anorexia. From what I know, my guess would be that prediction error component. So those with eating disorders, particularly anorexia nervosa, tend to have something called prediction error. So they tend to overpredict how distressing or anxiety provoking something is going to be. That obviously can get corrected the more nourished that somebody gets. It tends to be very severe whenever they're very malnourished. So I'm also guessing, or at least in the cases that I've seen, the financial anorexia would get worse the more malnourished that they are because the prediction error is increasing as well. So I think where prediction error comes into the financial piece is probably the fear that something's going to happen to their money. We often hear people talk about like, if I let go of this little bit of control, then I'm totally going to swing to the other end of the pendulum and I'm going to go completely mad. I'm going to spend all of the money or I'm going to eat all of the food. Most of the time, that doesn't actually happen. And if it does, they find a sort of balance. But I'm going to guess that there's prediction error involved in if I start spending my money, then it's going to completely spiral out of control. That's something that I'll also practice with people as well is spend if you have money. Like if we are honestly saying you do have a lot of money and you have a steady income, practicing spending like a little bit of money on yourself. I'm not even talking about getting your nails done or getting a massage or anything like that, because those are also tend to be more pricey. But if you are out in public and your lips are chapped, can you allow yourself to walk into like a Dollar Tree and buy yourself some chapstick? Something as little as kind of trivial as that, because the anxiety is so big, right? The anxiety, the prediction error is so high of what's going to happen if I do start spending my money. So it's interesting to see people sort of overcome that. I can certainly relate to this from my own journey as well. And even now, I think two things, if I'm really, really, really stressed, two things that I will come back to as kind of like a ritual that sort of decreases my anxiety. I'm not saying this is a healthy behavior, by the way. This is just such a telltale sign. There's some sort of internal unrest that I need to like sort out because I'll gravitate toward the grocery list and I'll just go over it over and over and over again. So, like the food piece, right? Or I'll go through the bank accounts and like the business bank account or my personal bank account or whatever. And I'll need some sort of reassurance around that. So, it is interesting, these parallels and these two things that are so related to our livelihood as well is money and nourishment. It is really interesting to explore some of those parallels. I've certainly seen it in some very, very severe eating disorder cases.
It's so interesting. And it's honestly in regards to evolution and human survival that
Hmm.
we want controlled environments. And that means, okay, I want control over my money. If my money is there and I can see the number and it's consistent and I can just not spend as much as possible, then I'm going to be okay. And then even the parallel back to anorexia, it's controlling that body image, controlling the calories that go into your body. And there's even parallels that I've seen as well with the reward systems,
Hmm.
because from what I've experienced with my eating disorder that I had when I was a teenager, and then also with clients, and what I've been learning is that there is a reward when people, and especially this is a societal standard, when people are like, oh, you've been losing weight, or, well, you're not really eating that much. And that makes people feel good if that is their goal, is to lose weight. And then same thing with money. Not a lot of people have a lot of money right now. The price of living is increasing. And so when someone tells you, or you're able to say, oh, I save a lot of money, I have a lot of money, I'm a really good saver, and then you get rewarded for that. Granted, yes, saving is important, but if you don't have those little micro doses of exposure that you were talking about, of, just go and buy yourself a little bit of chapstick, and it's exposing yourself to those little fears of, just having a bit of that slight consumption and intake for yourself of, I'm going to consume a little bit of food. I'm going to consume or spend a little bit of my money. I mean, it's a big fear thing to get over, but the fear versus the reward, sometimes it's really hard to outweigh those on your own when you're battling those symptoms. And so another thing that you were hinting at a bit is dysmorphia. And so in many eating disorders, or honestly, you could have an eating disorder or not. I feel like we all have some body dysmorphia symptoms at certain times, but there's also another concept that I've realized in my eating disorder and financial parallel universe research, that there's a concept called money dysmorphia. And that's a distorted view of your financial status. So you could think you have a lot of money or you're doing really well, and then you don't. And that's why your bank account is super low. You're using overdraft fees, all of that stuff. I've noticed in regards to our perceptions of money and our body and how those go hand in hand is very interesting.
Yeah, it's wild, the parallels that exist between these two things. I'm sure we could talk a ton about these components that seem so confined to just eating disorders. I think we can relate some of that back to prediction error as well, this kind of dysmorphic view of your bank account, thinking that you have, very little money, when in reality your financial situation is very stable.
Money is kind of a taboo topic. So I'm
Mhm.
not sure if a client has just come up to you and started dumping on you about their money situation, but I'm sure there have been times where it's trickled in a little bit. I've read some cases, examples online about people with binge eating disorder that will spend hundreds of dollars on a binge. And
Mhm.
now you not only consumed all that food and you're going through, the mental and physical consequences of that you may be putting on yourself, but you're also spending a lot of money on a lot of food. I'm wondering if you've experienced or at least like picked up on some of that stuff with your clients, of just kind of noticing some of that financial strain that eating disorder habits can have on an individual.
Oh gosh, we could talk so much about this because I actually think finances come up quite a bit in session, not just in regards to like paying for their session or their copays or things like that, but especially for college age students, it seems like it comes up a lot. It is sort of tricky to navigate as a therapist because sometimes I don't love the phrase I'm about to use, but for lack of a better phrase, sometimes we have to choose our battles. If someone's coming to me for help with their eating disorder, okay, so I'll just give like a case example. Someone who has chronic anorexia and, is constantly stressed about money, working two jobs, working an enormous amount on top of going to school. But the amount of money that she will spend on protein powder, protein bars, all this super expensive, quote unquote, health food, but because I'm so worried about her just eating an adequate amount every day, I'm not saying it will never come up, but at this point, I don't think it would be particularly helpful for her for me to bring up the fact that you're stressed about money, but you're spending $50 a week on this expensive protein powder when we both know you could get protein other ways. But we also just know that protein feels very safe to you and you're really heavily relying and controlling your protein. Protein's huge right now, right? So that's what I kind of mean by picking our battles. The financial piece is there. It is definitely there. And we should talk about it at some point, me and this patient. But now is not the time to bring it up.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Finance, Fitness, and Finesse. A big thank you to Caitlin Cornell for sharing her journey and expertise with us. Remember, financial literacy is key to building a better future, and with community leaders like Caitlin, we're one step closer to a financially empowered society. Be sure to tune in next Savvy Scholar Sunday for part 2. If you enjoyed this episode, help me learn with you, and be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Stay tuned for more episodes where we continue to elevate your wealth and wellness. I'm Jay Vick, and I'll see you at the next More Money Mondays episode. Until then, stay savvy, and if you don't know, now you know.